All right. Welcome in. Good evening. Wait for some people to join and we'll get started. Good evening. Hope everyone's doing well. All right. I'm going to test something real quick. Okay. Can you guys see? It's a little PowerPoint. I'm going to start doing this every week so we can actually look at the trades that we took. So can you guys see the PowerPoint screen and can you see me? Okay, perfect. All right, so let's just give it a minute and then we'll get started. Yeah, so basically, obviously we're kind of new to this weekly recap. At least Rab and myself, we just started doing these, and I'm going to start doing. I'm going to actually break down the trades that we've taken so far for the week. So since I'm doing these on Wednesdays, hopefully we have already taken a couple of trades by then. I've taken 3 trades so far. At least I've signaled 3 trades, and the 3 trades that I've signaled so far this week, I'll be talking about and I'll do a little bit of a PowerPoint, talk about the trades, how I traded them, how I signaled them, maybe how we could have done it a little bit differently. But it's important to go back and look at your trades and journal every trade. And then we'll also look at the future, the game plan for tomorrow. There's not a lot that I'm watching, but there's a couple of names that I still really like if we get the setup either tomorrow or Friday. But this is the way that I'm going to start structuring these. Basically, if there's a specific topic that I want to talk about, I'll just do it. Like last week I talked about stop losses, but most of the time I'm just going to talk about the trades that I've taken so far for the week, the trades that I've signaled in chat, and then we'll talk about the game plan moving forward. All right. So I just want to test one more time, make sure that you guys can hear me okay, and then I'll get started. All right, perfect. Yeah, it's been a good day. I mean, the morning was pretty choppy. I caught ES 5500 reject, and then I also caught that trade that I posted in the chat, right? The 541 breakdown on SPY. That was a really clean, beautiful trade that did 25% immediately, and then runners wound up going 40, 50% plus. So it was a good day for me. I didn't have a lot of size, but I still made 4,000 today. Let's see. Okay, yeah, the stairs. That's always fun too. I like to run up and down the stairs. It's a really good cardio workout. All right, so let's just get started. April 23rd, midweek. It's Wednesday. Welcome in. I've signaled 3 trades so far this week. I'm going to talk about those 3 trades. Okay, so first trade that I signaled was on Monday, April 21st. Okay, I took Netflix. So if you guys remember, I was watching Netflix over 1,000. 1,000 was a big hourly and daily level. All right, so I got filled on the 1060 calls at 4.80, and then I trimmed a couple of different times, and then I wound up stopping out of my runners around break even, and that was that 1,000 level. So I want to just go ahead and show you guys that trade. So basically, the way that I took this trade and what I was thinking in my head was, all right, Netflix had a really strong opening candle, right? It went from 984 to 1020. That's a $36 candle, right? That's a huge opening candle, and it didn't close very strong, but that's okay, right? So what was I thinking in my head to get an entry on that second candle of the day? I waited for that second candle to come down to the little pre-market high, that candle right before we opened at 995, and then reclaim 1,000. So as soon as that second 5-minute candle of the day reclaimed 1,000, that was my entry. Okay, so I got in as soon as it reclaimed 1,000. 1,000 was my entry, and my stop was simply if we got a candle close below that little pre-market level at 995, right? And we didn't get that. That next candle almost shook me out, but we still closed above the 995 level, and that's why I stayed in the trade, right? Now I didn't add size or anything because it's Netflix, and Netflix just trades a little funky. So I don't really like to put a lot of size on Netflix anyway. But I was comfortable in the trade and threw a little bit of a drawdown. And then that next candle, the fourth 5 minute candle of the day, that's where it reclaimed 1000 and pushed back into 1009, right? So it made a 9 point move above my entry. And I was able to get trims off. I got trims off at 13%, and then I got trims off at 20%. So the contracts went from 4.8, my entry, and I took trims at 5.35, and then I took trims at 5.7. I think the contracts went up like 5.8. So about $100 per con was the max potential that you could have made on this trade. Now it's not a sexy trade, it's a 20% trade, but that's okay. Like I talked about last week, the only thing that we can control is our entry and our stop, but we can't control what's going to happen after we get into the trade. Now Netflix could have gone and broken 1020 and gone to 1050, all right, which it wound up doing yesterday. Once it finally flushed, it broke that 1000 and got the buyers. Yesterday was just a crazy move on Netflix, but there was no possible entry, right? But that could have happened on Monday because that 1000 was a big level. Okay. Now we can't control that. The only thing we can control is our entry and our stop. Okay. So 1000 was my entry, 995 was my stop. All right. A $5 stop. It's a little bit wide, but we were light size. All right. And then we still got a 9 point move out of it. And we were able to trim at 13 and then 20%. And then simply your trail stops. So the way that I use trail stops is I use my breakout level as my trail. So if I'm getting in at 1000 and it makes a move above 1000, which in this case it did, right? It went to 1009. My trail stop is then my entry price. So my entry price was 1000. That's exactly where I'm getting out. If it fails back below my entry price, then I get out. So I stopped out of my runners near break even. I think it was a little bit of a loss, but it was near break even at that 1000 level. Okay. So that was the Netflix trade, pretty straight up scalp there. I mean, nothing big, but it was still a good trade. Okay, so that was the trade I signaled on Monday. Any questions about that? Yeah, Greg. So I'll go over that. That's the third trade that I took, was the SPY. That was today. Okay, perfect. Makes sense. All right, so the second trade that I took was yesterday. I signaled this yesterday, and Tuesday, April 22nd, right? So we got in SPY calls, and I got in the 1 DTE, 1 day to expiration, 523 calls. My average was 3.39. Brett also took this trade. It was a good setup. It was unavoidable. We had to take this. So I trimmed I think my first trim was 15%, and then 24, and then I was out at 27%. This was a really good trade. I think I could have trailed better, so I'll show you that in this example. All right, so we were watching a reclaim of 520, right? 520 was that big hourly level on SPY, and Brett and Rav took the breakdown on 520 on Monday, I believe. Yeah, so 520, they took the breakdown short. So on Tuesday, I took the reclaim long, right? It's the exact same level, but Monday was a breakdown, and yesterday was a reclaim. Okay. Now I actually could have gotten an entry as soon as it reclaimed 520, but it kind of just ripped on me. It just ripped really fast, and so I didn't wind up getting filled on the reclaim of 520. I had to wait for a pullback. There's nothing wrong with that, all right? But just be prepared to get in if it does get a pullback. So this is pretty much just a trend entry as SPY reclaim 520, right? Bulls were in control, and once that fourth 5 minute candle of the day, that red candle came back down to like 521, that's where I got in. And then I took trims once it pushed back into high of day around 522. Right, 522 was a level I had on the hourly. And then I took profit around 523, 523.50. And I did that because I had a big level at 524, and I just didn't have enough size to keep holding. But I can say that one thing I could have done differently with this trade is trail my stop a little bit higher and take more profit from this trade, right? Because this trade wound up going to 525, and then it actually went to like 529, right? So instead of taking profit at 27%, I probably could have squeaked out 40 or 50%, right? So what I usually do is move my stop anytime we break a key level. So let's say SPY broke 522, then 522 becomes my new stop, right? And then as it makes a dollar leg higher, then I'll move my stop up every 50 cents or a dollar, right? So if it breaks 522 and then breaks 523, move your stop up, and that way you guys can kind of uh, take advantage of the entire move, right? It's nice to get a good trade. It's easy, 27% in 10 minutes in this trade on SPY, but it would also be nice to take advantage of the full move. Okay, so even we've been trading for so many years, but it's important to look back and see what could you have done maybe a little bit differently, and maybe make a little bit more money on that trade, right? So in this example, I would have trailed my stops a little bit better, okay? But I wound up taking profit at 27%. Still a really good trade and pretty straightforward. This is just a trend entry. We wanted to go long on that reclaim of 520. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Can you clarify what you mean when you say you didn't have enough size to keep holding? Yeah. So basically, let's say I take an entry with 30 contracts, right? And on my first trim, I'm selling 15 to 20. Okay. I'll sell half of my position when I'm trimming 15 to 20 contracts. And then from there, we get another 10% higher, right? So let's say I trim 15 contracts at 15%. Then we get to 25%. I'll sell another five contracts, right? And then we get to 30%. I'll sell another five contracts. And then at that time, I'm down to, my runners, which are five contracts. And for me, it's just not worth it to sit there and keep holding for another hour. I'd rather go look for other opportunities in the market. But definitely, especially if you're new, you should be taking advantage of those trail stops as much as possible. If you're trading with only three contracts or something, then you need to make sure that you actually are hanging on to that runner as long as you possibly can. All right. But that's what I mean when I don't have enough size to keep on holding. I'm usually down to like 5 or 10 contracts, and I'd rather just take profit at 30% and move on to the next trade. No, I don't have a daily goal or profit percent gain, because every day is different. And if you hold yourself to a goal, then you're going to try to hit that goal every single time. And if it's a choppy market and you don't hit it, you'll be pushing out trades, boredom trades that aren't really good setups, and you'll wind up giving away money. So I don't think anyone should really have a daily goal or profit percent. Just trade the best setups that you can, and on days where there's strong trends, try to take advantage of those trends and hold your runners as long as possible. All right. So this was Tuesday, and this was today, right? So I actually caught a couple of entries on SPY today. I got the ES 5500 level, but it was just impossible to signal. It just happened so fast. It literally popped into 55, and then within seconds was back down at like 55.85. It was just too fast of a move to signal. But I did wind up signaling a little bit later in the day at 10:18 Central, so that's 11:18 Eastern. I called SPY puts, right? So I said I was loading the 538 puts, 1 DTE, filled at 3.31. All right, so we'll look at the chart here in a second, but I even texted my plan. So I got in around 541, 542 was my stop. So I had a $1 stop, which would have been maybe a 15% loss on 1 day expirations. And my target was sub 540. So think about that. I'm getting in shorts at 541. My stop is 542. My target is below 540. So I'm risking less than what my potential is to make. Okay. Because I'm looking for an exit of lower than 540. So my stop is 1. My target is over 1. Okay. For dollar, for that risk reward. Right. So that's how you kind of have to be thinking about every trade. What are you willing to risk? My risk on this trade was $1, and my target was over $1. I took my first trim at 539, right? So my first trim was at 25%. And then I said 541 trail stop. And we were up 30% at that point. Then we saw 35% within only 8 minutes of entry. And then I took profit at 44%. Okay, now let's look at the chart. So you guys saw this today. This was really clean. I wish I was on live to take it, but we had already hopped off. But I got in on that candle. I didn't even wait. It closed a little bit before 541, but I didn't want to miss out as if that next candle dumped, which it wound up doing, right? So it had already tested that level so many times. I figured, all right, this is a very weak close end of 541 with rising volume. I think the next candle is going to break. So I'm willing to get in before it actually breaks to take advantage of that IV, right? So as soon as it does break down, the IV pumps, people chase shorts, the contracts explode, right? So sometimes it's okay to get in before the level actually breaks, right? SPY had been tapping that 541 all morning. There was obvious weakness in the market. We had been saying that from the beginning of the day. All of us were looking at shorts, right? So when 541 finally tapped and was looking weak, I just decided, all right, I'm getting in here. I'll have 542 as my stop, a $1 stop, and sub 540, so like 539 is my target. $1 risk, $2 reward, right? So my first trend was 539. Okay. So I was risking 15% and I made 25% plus. I wound up making 44%, which was my full profit. And again, I could have trailed this a little bit better. Okay. But I just, I wind up selling a lot of my positions around 40 or 50% because I get tired of holding. I don't have enough size to keep on holding, but that's fine. You guys can trade however you want. That's just the way that I trade. But you can trail this. 541 was my original trail. You could have moved your trail to 540. Since that next candle didn't break 540, maybe you could have squeezed out more return down into 536, and then just move your trail in increments. All right. So if you're trading with lower size, it's more important to use that trail as much as you can. Okay. This was a really straightforward trade. So are there any questions about that one? Yeah, we hopped off a little early today on live. We could have stayed on. I think there were already several trades taken, so and it was a really choppy morning. So we just hopped off live, but that's fine. Tech signals, it was fine. I didn't have a level at 540.28 or anything like that. It was just 541. That was the pivot from the morning. All morning, you guys can see those wicks. It was the pre-market high. It wicked off of it at like 10:15, and then it wicked off it again at 11 when that news came out. So 541 was the level. As soon as we flushed 541, that's when longs got stopped out. It was very, very clear below that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just a breakdown trade. All right. So those are the three trades that I've taken so far this week, or the trades that I've signaled at least. All pretty straightforward. SPY today over 40% trade. Yesterday was 27%, but wound up doing over 40% as well. Netflix, not at the sexiest trade, but it was still a 13 to 20% scalp, right? And then as long as it's also really important to sell your runners at break even or just below break even. Don't let if you're trimming at 15 to 20%, don't let that trade go red. I see people do that often. It's so stupid. If you have a green trade, you're up 15 to 20%, that trade should never go red after you've already trimmed. All right. If anything, sell your contracts at break even, especially if you have a small account, just sell your contracts at break even. Okay. All right. So that was the recap. Now let's jump into kind of the game plan. Okay. Hmm. All right. Can you guys see trading view now? All right, perfect. Yeah, so I'm not watching a lot for tomorrow. It kind of depends what happens overnight. There's a lot of shit happening right now with China and Trump and the tariffs, and I don't really know what's going to happen overnight as far as gap up or gap down. But I can say that there are only really two or three setups that I have my eyes on. There's some obvious levels like the Apple 200 level. That's a potential trade for tomorrow, a bounce off of that 200. But my favorite setups are Netflix. Right? I've talked about this. So Netflix has this beautiful flag now. on the hourly, really clear flag, okay? And it's flagging into where? Into previous all-time high, right? So 1065 was big previous all-time high. You can see it on the 4-hour, you can see it on the daily, right? Really nice consolidation into this level. I'm actually glad that it didn't break today and that it consolidated a little bit, right? You see the consolidation candle. So now, if Netflix can break above 1065 tomorrow, show some strength above that level, we can take the retest and go long into 1100. Okay, because once we break 1065, we're in price discovery. Okay, we're testing levels that Netflix has never seen. So 1065 is a big level on Netflix. If we get a break and hold above that, I'm looking for longs tomorrow. Very obvious level, really clean hourly chart, bullish flag, bullish momentum over the 1000, not affected by tariffs, really positive earnings report saying that they're planning to triple or double their subscriber growth and double their market cap by 2030. Okay, so within 5 years, they're planning to double everything. And if we break 1065, maybe we go to 1100. Okay, so that's a big level on Netflix. Another one that's kind of obvious, maybe Nvidia, right? This isn't a top watch for me, but that 100 level, okay, depending what happens overnight, obviously, right? But that 100 level on Nvidia, if we get a retest of that tomorrow and it holds, okay, then we can look for a bounce above or a bounce off of 100, and for a pushback into today's area, basically, right? If let's say the market cap's down and Nvidia opens at 100, then we can look for a break and retest below 100. Okay. So 100 is basically just the psychological whole number. Okay, it's a level. I mean, you can see the reactions off of it. Last week, it acted as a support, and then yesterday, it acted as a resistance. So support turned into resistance. It rejected off of 100, and then we broke above, and now we're trading above 100. If market is strong, we take the bounce. If market is weak, then we can take the flush below and retest. All right. So Nvidia, that's one I'm watching. And then Tesla. All right, Tesla. I think Tesla is going to make a big move. All right. I look at this daily chart on Tesla. All right. Tesla has been in a serious downtrend since December of 24, right? So just 5 months now. It's been a 5-month downtrend. It went from 490 to 220 for obvious reasons, right? You guys have seen everything that's going on with Tesla, Tesla and Musk and all of that stuff. But it does have a big flag or a big whatever triangle, pattern, whatever you want to call it, okay? On the chart here, this trend. So if Tesla can break above this trend and this 260 level, which is a big hourly level, then we're going to get a move back into 290, 300. That's just a fact. All right. Regardless of the sentiment that you feel on Tesla, that's a big level. So if Tesla can break 260 tomorrow, all right, if it can break out of this hourly, daily downtrend and break above 260, then we're getting a massive move. Maybe it's just to this previous high from April 9, 275, but that's still a $15 move, right? So that's a big watch for me. I'm watching Tesla over 260. All right. And then for the downside, 245 was that big pivot. If you guys remember, Tesla was in this range last week from the 10th to the 16th. It was in this range from 260 to 245. So 245 was acting as support. Okay, you guys see all that demand right there. So that was a support. It broke below 245 and then it acted as a resistance. So 245 became new resistance after it flushed and then made a move into 222.5. Okay. And then today, 245 was actually a pivot. Right. So Tesla came down and we held 245 and made a big move back to 260. So for downside, if Tesla, can't break this 260 level and we get below 245, I think this thing can drop like a rock back to the low 220s. Right? We could get a 10% move on Tesla if we break back below 245. right? Because 245 is that pivot that's been holding us up. And if we break back below that, there's just nothing. I don't think any buyers are going to come in. If Tesla gets some weakness tomorrow or whatever, I don't think buyers are going to come in at all. Now we can still squeeze though. Right? So there's two potentials on Tesla. We either lose that 245 and go back to 220, or we break 260, and I think we can get just a massive move because then we're breaking out of this huge downtrend, right? This 4-hour daily, whatever you want to call it, this massive downtrend. If we break 260, this thing is going to 275 minimum. 275 minimum. I think we go to 290, 300 because that would just be a massive short squeeze. Right? A lot of people are short Tesla. Their earnings, right? They missed EPS by 34%. They missed revenue by 9%. It was a big earnings miss. But Elon Musk finally said that he's at least going to go back into, focus on Tesla and not so much the Doge, right? The government. So maybe we get a short squeeze, people thinking Elon is going to do something to help Tesla stock back. All right. So if we break 260, I'm going long on Tesla tomorrow for sure. If we break 245, I'll be looking for shorts. Right? Very simple. So those are really the only things I'm watching as far as the game plan goes for tomorrow and Friday. Not a lot. SPY. Yeah, we can look at the levels on SPY as well. So SPY, the big level that I have is 548, which lines up with SPX 5500. Okay. And we didn't get there today, but we got close. 5500 is that massive daily pivot on SPX, which is the S&P 500, right? 5500. So that was that previous double bottom on the daily, 55. That's where we weren't able to break back above, even after that big 10.5% day, when Trump paused tariffs for 90 days. So in order for the market to see higher, we have to break 5,500. This is now a very key point in the market. You guys can see what's happening here. This was a massive support, okay? This was a massive support in the market. We double bottomed. We flushed that support, and 55 became resistance. So is this a, double top? Is this a double top retesting 5,500 and we go see lower? Maybe. I don't know, right? The only thing that we can do, we can't predict, but we can react, okay? So if SPX breaks back above 5,500, then we can go back to this previous high at 5,800, right? Or even 5,700. Somewhere in there is where we'll see supply, right? But 5,500 is the key moving forward, at least in the short term, okay? In order for the market to see more upside, we would have to break 5,500, which aligns with 548 on SPY, okay? 548 on SPY, 550, all right, whatever, same kind of area. If we break above that on SPY, then we go back to 570, 575, okay? But as far as trades on SPY tomorrow, it kind of depends what happens overnight, all right? I mentioned the levels that I like on the other names. Those are more true in point, but with SPY, it really depends if we get a major gap down or major gap up. I do really like the 529, 530 level, which aligns with SPX 5300. All right, and that's the gap fill level. So SPX made a big move today, right above. Today it just gapped up, right? The market gapped up. So if the market isn't completely weak tomorrow, then we can look for a retest of that 5300, which is the gap fill. Okay, we should see some relief off of that, but again, it really depends what happens overnight. Okay, but those are the levels on SPY. So 545, which was ES 5500 today. We have 529. Okay, and then the 548, 550 area. All right. If let's say the market gaps down and we're looking weak in the morning, then we could actually take a flush of 529, 530 area, right? A break and retest for shorts. Just depends what happens overnight. We'll talk about that in the morning, obviously. For Qs, I have the 450 level. 448 is also a big level, okay? And then I think for upside, check. Yeah, 466. 466 is the big level I have on the Qs for upside. Okay, so if we want to see more upside on the Qs, we got to break that 466. That was that previous support turned into resistance. Break 466, we go back to the 480s, 490s. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it for charting. That's what I'm watching. Earnings. We have a few airlines tomorrow morning. Intel. We have Google after hours on Thursday. Maybe we could take a trade on Google on Friday. And then next week we have a lot more earnings. Okay. But not too much going on. Economic data, there's really nothing. We have durable goods in the morning, jobless claims, existing home sales, nothing huge. Okay, maybe we get a little reaction, probably not. All right, but that's pretty much it. So that's the plan. Any questions about that? How do I come up with the watch list? Doing what I just did. Just go through each one of these names and chart, try to find key levels. That's it. I don't size down on Thursdays. I size down on Fridays or anytime I take zero DTE. No, reclaim isn't the same as a bounce. Reclaim is reclaiming a key level. So let me think. I think Brett took a reclaim today actually. Yeah. So after I went short on SPY, Brett went long, and he took the reclaim of 5400. So ES 5400. He didn't take the initial bounce. He signaled once it broke 5400. So this is what a reclaim is, right? Let's say you have a level at 5400, it breaks below, and then it reclaims. So this is the reclaim candle. It reclaimed with a nice, juicy, solid green candle with some volume, and that's where he entered long. So that's what a reclaim candle is. And then your stop is just simply, well, it depends. Like if you want to be conservative, your stop can be the level, right? So 5400. If you want to be, if you want to widen your stops a bit, it can just be the low of that candle. Oh yeah, Mojo. I add to long term positions anytime we have a big red day in the market. Anytime a stock that I love goes down another 5 or 10%, I just add to my positions. Yeah. So if you're only trading 2 to 4 contracts, okay. So what I would do with the trail stops on something like that, let's just look at SPY. Yeah, I'm going to answer this question and then I have to pop off. But with if you're trailing, let's say you only enter 3 contracts, right? And you got in my SPY trade today. Okay, so let's say this was your entry. This is where we got in at 541. Stop was 542. So if you're trading 3 contracts, here's what I would do with a small account. All right. So once we get to 15 to 20%, which is what I said, right? My first trend was once we broke 540. So 539 was my first trend. That was 25% was first trend. All right. So if you're trading 3 contracts, I would sell 2, right? I would sell 2 at 25%, which was the first level, and then have the level as your trail stop. All right. If we get another leg lower, which we did, then you can move your trail stop down. So then after this next candle closes, then 540 is your trail stop on the last contract. It never got to 540. Okay. So then this next candle comes down, you move your trail stop to 539. It didn't get to 539. Right. So then you're taking advantage. Right. So 538 becomes your trail. It didn't get to 538. Where are you going to get stopped out? I'll show you as you're moving this down in $1 increments, right? So it's pushing new lows. It goes to 536. 537 becomes your trail. So you would have sold your final contract at 1225. right? Which, that's probably an 80% trade if you held that one last contract. Okay. So if you're trading three contracts, sell two contracts when you're up anywhere between 15 and 25%, right? That's kind of the target that I would go for, and use a break even stop on your last one, right? So if, let's say, in this scenario, SPY went back to 541, you can just sell that contract at break even. That way you're not letting that last contract let your trade go red, right? And as it moves in your favor, use a trail stop of $1. Okay. Eventually you'll get stopped. Okay. Actually, you would have gotten stopped out right here at 11:55. Right. So if once this candle closed below 537 becomes your trail. This is the candle you would have exited actually at 11:55, your last contract. All right. So that's what I would do. Yeah, you get in all at the same time if you're trading. If three contracts is your max size, yeah. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be back on live every Wednesday. I'm doing this every Wednesday, so I'll be back on next Wednesday, same time, 7 o'clock Eastern. Hope you guys enjoyed this. The recording will be on my channel. If you want to go back and look, obviously, I'll talk about every trade that I've taken, be as transparent as I can, showing you guys the entries. You guys, if any of you trade with us on live, we're super transparent about our entries and our exits. So, yeah, hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining.